I have never been bothered about being alone. In fact, I have built my entire life around solitude. As a nature photographer, I spend weeks in remote places with nothing but my camera and the wilderness to keep me company. It is what I love most about my work: the quiet, the peace, the undisturbed beauty of a world untouched by human hands. Most people think hiking alone is dangerous, and they're right to think so. Many stories out there prove their point. For me, it is a routine. Crowds have never been my thing, which is why I avoid trails during holidays or weekends. Those times are when the wilderness feels less like an escape and more like a tourist attraction. I prefer the stillness of off-peak days, when the only sounds are the rustling of leaves and the calls of distant birds. That is how I found myself on this particular trail, midweek in late autumn. I had read about the mountain in a blog, how its summit offered breathtaking views of both sunset and sunrise. The idea of capturing that golden light, the kind photographers dream of, was too tempting to pass up. I packed light, my camera, tripod, a sleeping bag and enough food and water for a day. I planned to hike up, spend the night near the summit, and head back down after sunrise. It wasn't my first solo trek, and I had no reason to think it would be any different from the others, but I should have thought otherwise. This is The Cabin in the Woods. The trail was perfect, quiet, secluded, with trees that towered overhead like umbrellas. The crisp air smelled of pine and damp earth, and the forest floor was a mosaic of falling leaves in shades of amber and crimson. Everything about the day felt right, like the world itself was encouraging me to keep going. But that ethereal view wasn't distracting enough to have me lower my guards, which shouldn't ever even be the case when out in the wild, and thanks to that, I noticed him. It was a brief glimpse at first, just a figure far down the trail behind me. I didn't think much of it. Other hikers occasionally ventured out midweek, although it was rare. But as I continued, I noticed he wasn't falling behind, nor was he catching up to surpass me. No matter how far I walked, he maintained the same distance. I tried to ignore the unease creeping up my spine. Maybe he was just another solo hiker with a similar plan. Maybe he wasn't even aware of me. But the longer it went on, the harder it became to shake the feeling that he was deliberately keeping pace. By mid-afternoon, the unease had turned into a full-blown anxiety. Not that it helped that I am also a professional overthinker who could conjure the worst of the worst-case scenarios. I sped up, hoping to widen the gap, but every time I glanced back, he was still there, a dark silhouette moving between the trees. He never got closer, never lagged behind, just followed with an unsettling consistency. By the time the sun began to sink low in the sky, casting long shadows across the trail, I knew I couldn't spend the night at the summit. The thought of camping alone with him lurking nearby was unbearable at the least, and definitely unsafe. I was running out of options, one of which was turning back, but that will alert him. When I noticed it, a faint trail branching off from the main one. It wasn't marked on my map, but it seemed to lead in a similar direction. If I could just take it for a while and lose him, I could cycle back to the main trail in the morning. Without hesitation, I veered off. The path was rough, barely more than a game trail, and overgrown with tangled roots and fallen branches. The trees grew denser, their twisted limbs forming a canopy that blocked out what little daylight remained. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see him emerge from the shadows, but the trail was empty. For the first time all day, I felt a flicker of relief. That relief was short-lived. It happened so fast I didn't even have time to react. One moment, I was carefully navigating a steep slope, and the next, the ground gave way beneath me. I tumbled down the incline, branches clawing at my skin as the walls spun in a blur of green and brown. When I finally came to a stop, pain exploded through my body. My left ankle was twisted at an unnatural angle, and every breath sent a sharp ache through my ribs. My palms were scraped raw, and my head dropped from where I had struck the ground. For a moment, I just lay there, dazed and disoriented. The forest around me was silent, as if holding its breath. I needed help, but I had no idea where I was. The trail was long gone, and the light was fading fast. I looked around, craning my neck as far as I could without feeling pain. That was when I saw a faint glow flickering through the trees. There is someone there. Hopefully, a harmless person, and not like the stalker I had gotten away from. I don't remember much of the journey there towards the light, which turned out to be a cabin. Only the agony of dragging myself there, inch by inch. My vision blurred, and my body screamed in protest, but the promise of shelter kept me going. When I finally reached the cabin, I was so weak I could barely lift my hands to knock, and before I could, the world went dark. I woke up to the sound of crackling firewood and a peculiar sensation of warmth spreading through my aching body. My eyes fluttered open, and I found myself lying on a threadbare couch in the middle of a dimly lit room. The air smelled of smoke and damp wood, tinged with something bitter and medicinal. I turned my head slightly and froze. They were sitting across from me, a family of 4. At first, they seemed normal, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized something was off. Their faces didn't look right. The skin was too smooth, too tight, but at the same time too wrinkly, as if it had been stretched over their skulls and then unceremoniously released. Their eyes were glassy, unblinking, and their lips never moved. The man and woman, whom I assumed were the parents, sat stiffly in 2 one-arm chairs near the fire. The 2 children, a boy and a girl, were crouched on the floor, their limbs folded awkwardly like marionettes waiting to be animated. All 4 of them stared at me,